And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM this Monday morning. Johnny Ward is with us. Johnny, how are you?
Very well, Ger.
A weekend of retirements.
A weekend of retirements, yeah. Big story that the two lady amateurs who've been so profound in terms of their role in racing, retiring on the same weekend. Can't help but feel Katie Walsh tried to get there before Nina, day before. All the rumours were at Punchestown Friday that Nina was going to retire, and then a lot of shock when Katie Walsh retired, and then it was like, oh, the rumour was kind of right in that a lady amateur's retirement got the wrong person. But then, of course, Nina retired on Saturday. I think with Nina, you know, she's had her first child, and I'd say she probably wants to focus on working with Ballydoyle as well, which is her kind of day-to-day job, and also just you know, it's still a very dangerous pursuit. I think with Katie as well, there's probably an element of that. Katie's done a lot of buying and selling of horses, and her brother Ruby, you know, is kind of limping along there, quite literally trying to get back from his latest leg break, and she probably thought, you know, it mightn't be a bad time to bow out.
Yeah, I'd say there comes a point when you go, I've done this a lot, and on the law of averages, at some point, I'm going to break something badly, and I've probably broken a lot of stuff along the way. Now's not a bad time. Things are going well.
Like John Thomas McNamara was on the verge of retirement when he suffered what would be a life-ending injury in Cheltenham. I think he was 37 at the time, and he was obviously an amateur as well. But I would say that did affect jockeys when they thought, you know, if I'm coming towards the end, especially if you have a family, like it's just... obviously, a footballer or any sportsman will tell you it's never the same once you retire. It's always playing trumps everything, and I'm sure it's like that for a jockey as well. It must be an unbelievable buzz, and to lose that buzz, Richard Dunwoody would talk a lot about that as well, pursuing marathons in North Korea and that to get the buzz back. But
yeah, but even AP was saying that he hasn't really ever recovered. He's bored, and I think it's different though when you're a professional, when you're an amateur, right? There's a little bit of a significant difference in that you have an exterior life.
Yeah, and like amateurs wouldn't ride it nearly as much. You know, Tony McCoy was extremely and is extremely driven to the point of obsession. And I don't think all jockeys are like that. There are some jockeys who are retired have no worries. Ruby's done great work on RT as well. When he eventually retires, I think he'll have no problem taking over his father's mantle in RT if that were the case. But it's an incredibly dangerous sport, and you know, Katie and Nina have done very well injury-wise, which is testament to their ability as well. They really, you know, they didn't have too many falls. It's now, you know, Lisa O'Neill, she becomes now the main lady rider in the amateur game, and obviously Rachel Blackmore as well, who's had a great career as a pro. And I keep saying this, there were 4 lady riders winning at Cheltenham this year, which was phenomenal really, and the sport is hopefully becoming a more inviting place for potential jockeys of the fairer sex. Let's
move on and bring you the morning newspapers.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
Starting this morning with the Irish Independent, good piece here from Rory O'Connor wondering if the IRFU have any plans for the succession of Joe Schmidt at the end of the Joe Schmidt year, which is obviously coming at the end of the World Cup. Can we stick that paper up? There we go. At the bottom there, Schmidt alert for Ireland. Time for the IRFU to plan for life without coach. Numbers add up for Mullins. This is quantity and quality seals title for master training. We'll talk in a bit more detail with Johnny about that later on. And then Taylor Eye's third belt, a significant win for Kerry Taylor at the weekend. The main picture there, obviously, the picture of Arsene Wenger at Old Trafford yesterday. Let's move on to the Irish Times. Stick the Irish Times up there. IRFU talk to bring Carberry one step closer to Ulster is the lead there. Johnny Waterson's story on the sidebar. Also, Wenger praises classy tribute. This is Old Trafford benignly welcoming Arsene Wenger.
I was quite moved by that, I have to say now. I actually was. I'm a sop for nostalgia and the whole mortality with which we struggle in life in general, and any sort of flashback. And also, you know, a coach being in the job over 2 decades is completely it's completely anomalous at this stage. And when Fergie came out, and I was certain that Wenger would get a good reception from the crowd, because I think it's kind of like the Crucible, they're a knowledgeable crowd, but the Old Trafford crowd has always kind of impressed me, even when...
Well, they're mixed, right? Let's not give the Old Trafford crowd too much credit here.
In general, like, I know...
Portions of it go to all the games, portions of it are tourists.
Totally, and they're there for their you know, being there once a year, you're more likely to spend more money and all that, and they sit down, they probably don't know. But the actual Man United fans, I thought they treated Moyes and Van Gaal, considering how accustomed they were to success, I thought they treated those managers quite well in relative terms. They weren't at them very early. And, you know, Wenger is such a part of that narrative of the last 20 years, that great rivalry. And he's a guy who's always carried himself with a lot of class. And obviously we remember that incident where he kicked the bottle and the fans were getting after him. But, you know, they will respect him. They know that he's been a big part of their life as well. And Fergie coming out, I mean, they say the same old story for Wenger. There was an element of that. It was like, it's kind of appropriate that they blow a goal from.
Perfect.
It really was. It was like,
if you were to write a script about Wenger's relationship with Old Trafford, it's Marwan Fellaini.
Well, he brought on Fellaini. In fairness to Mourinho, he brought on Fellaini. He hit the woodwork basically, and his aerial prowess was problematic for Arsenal and ended up being the difference. Because Arsenal played well actually. They looked comfortable for much of the game, and you're kind of looking at them and you're saying that this is interesting now, considering the new coach coming in. The players obviously rested and they're actually good here, but it was appropriate that was the way it ended. Wenger, we'll talk about him as well, but he's actually half alluding to taking a break now, which is, I think, is very wise. Like it's like if you're like in his job, do you see anything other than seeing life through the prism of being a football manager? There is more stuff out there.
Well, he said he didn't. He said he had no outside interest apart from football, that it was 7 days a week. And like,
I find that hard to believe.
I mean, in some ways it showed that he was obsessed and in his own wormhole of like, as opposed to actually taking a look outside and seeing that there is an alternative way of doing things and maybe bringing a bit of that to bear. Like, there was never a sense that he was watching other sports to see what they were doing to try and steal a march, or I don't know. It just didn't feel like he'd progressed very much himself over the last while.
No,
or understood how the game had changed.
Yeah, well, we played a clip there during the week of John Giles speaking about Klopp and Liverpool's potential to win the league next season. And John Giles said that he's never sure with Liverpool under Klopp, even if they're 3-0 up, you wouldn't be counting your money. And he made it the point that Klopp isn't going to change. And I think as a coach, if you don't change, you're going to be left behind, because football is evolving. Man City are offering something now that the Premier League hasn't seen before, and Wenger looks lost, really. I mean, Arsenal have looked lost in those games. Actually, do you know one thing? It was Aidan O'Hara put up on Twitter yesterday from the Irish Independent. Their away record is absolutely appalling. And I think they have 17 points from 13 games.
Arsenal this season.
Arsenal, dreadful away record, which to me would imply a mental fragility that we've all suspected anyway.
Well, they'd lost every game up until the last one. Did they get an away draw recently? But anyway, for the first 2.5 months of the season, first 2.5 months of the calendar year, this year, they lost every away game.
But it's, you know, we might talk about Gerrard potentially going to Rangers and the attraction or otherwise of that job. The Arsenal job has to be really attractive.
Oh, it's one of the best jobs ever.
Yeah.
Stadium is entirely paid for, it's
London,
ready to go.
Living in London, you know, big club, potentially big resources as well.
Yeah, they say there aren't going to be resources, but there will be as soon as the success starts to come. As soon as you offer some kind of hint of success, they'll row in with loads of money behind you there. The Examiner, let's have a look at the Examiner this morning. So the front page of the Examiner is football, same old story again. More Manchester anguish for Wenger as old foes say farewell. Katie Taylor on the top there. When you have Roy Jones on his feet at ringside applauding, that says it all. Yeah, Katie Taylor's as dominant now in her sport as Floyd Mayweather was at any point, but not quite making the same money. Could we stick that back up there and I'll run through the bottom few stories there, yeah. And so, playoff promise, Munster handed Taute boost Grobler to depart. The news that Gerbrand Grobler is departing isn't really news at all. It's just been confirmed by Munster, but it was only ever a one-year deal. We'll talk about that a little bit more with Alan Quinlan a little bit later on. And then the big news from the weekend was that Seamus Callan was back on the field playing his first competitive game since back surgery. So that's huge news.
Massive, yeah. They did look like they missed him later on in the league, and obviously Ford came in and was brilliant, but Tip have to. I was really disappointed with Tip against Kilkenny. I thought they were well outplayed
in the league final. Totally,
and I'd be sceptical about how good Kilkenny actually are if Richie Hogan still hasn't actually recovered from his own injuries. And Tip, it mightn't have been a bad thing that Tip they probably got a bit of a, well, this is a bit of a wake-up call just before we go into the championship, because it hasn't really been talked about how insane the Munster Championship will be this year. You know, one very good team is going to finish last. And be out. And it's like, you know, you look at, I met Anthony Cunningham during Punchestown. We were talking about this. Dublin are getting ready for Leinster. Dublin are going to target third. and realistic or otherwise, they're going to target third. But like Leinster compared to Munster is absolutely no comparison.
Yeah, that third spot is still, there's definitely 3 really good teams. And if Dublin can beat one of those good teams, then they're in with a shout.
Definitely, yeah. Dublin have, they're playing
Kilkenny and Parnell Park.
Kilkenny and Parnell Park, yeah. They've Galway in Parnell Park as well, I think. And like they obviously were a long way behind in the league, but they were building for a goal. And Liam Rush, he was very happy with him. He said he's coming on great. And Dublin still have a lot of potential. There's maybe a slight worry that Wexford have put an awful lot of effort into being fit for the league as well. That's something I would worry about. Galway, it's very hard to know. They're kind of just limping along with the view to getting there for the championship, but it's going to be fascinating.
Galway have a free pass this year. As reigning All-Ireland champions, it's like, yeah, look, you know what, we get to manage our resources in a way that we've done this now, and which they haven't ever had.
Totally. Really. I was thinking the other day as a Galway fan, the championship this year is completely different. It's just every year there was always this like that horrible thing called hope, and hope is a killer.
How are we going to blow it this time?
Yeah, it's hope is a killer. Like contrary to what was said in Shawshank Redemption, it can be a terrible thing. But now that they've won it, it's like okay, well if we win it again, that's great. But at least we're not like 3 decades without an All Ireland. But hopefully the squad don't look at it that way because we're in the big the hurling championship is going to be so good this year. Like now, I'm not sure how the Super 8's going to work
in football.
Sorry, not Super 8s, but how the new round robin system, but. How there are so many teams who could conceivably win the All Ireland.
Yeah,
they really are.
Yeah, it's a real pity that we're not seeing Kilkenny and Tip in Nolan Park in a championship match in the round robin. I would have said that would have been slightly better, but
Galway are playing Kilkenny at home, and it's the first time.
Had a game in Salt Hill.
Yeah, first game. They played Clare in a qualifier. They've never obviously played Leinster, but it'll be sold out, I'd say, which has never happened before for a Galway hurling game, I would have thought. In Salt Hill.
Finally Leinster waking up to the fact that
crazy stuff.
We've got this massive resource which we could tap into and make money out of and help to grow the game. That whole stuff about hurling people all being in it together was all complete bollocks when it came to and not letting Galway into the underage competitions in Leinster as well.
Absolutely.
Galway should have just said, okay, Grant, we'll join Munster then.
Yeah,
you can have your crappy championship to yourselves. Because Galway saved the Leinster championship for the last decade. Yeah,
Leinster's become a pretty good place now at the moment. Once Dublin rises, we'll have a proper 4 teams in it. But it'll be nice to see that because Galway, Pearse Stadium, the money that was put into it. I always think they should have developed Tuam. I think it was a disgrace what they did. Tuam needed help as a town, and Galway didn't. They put all their eggs in the Pearse Stadium basket. But there are very few games played there actually of any consequence.
So to the Irish News next. The Irish News, yeah. Seventh Heaven, they're leading with the Celtic story. Brendan Rodgers has completely restored his reputation. I mean, he was on a hiding to nothing pretty much. And then I presume that's a Johnny McGurk story, is it? McGurk furious over demands on his players. We'll get a bit more detail on that and I'll tell you a bit more about it. But if you were Stephen Gerrard, what the hell are you thinking? Unless you're going in as player manager at Rangers.
You said that. Is that...
No, it's not even a possibility. It's a joke. I'm completely taking the piss.
Yeah, like what age is he?
37.
Like he'd be more than competent at that level were he to go back.
He would.
Like he wouldn't be out of place. I don't. Eamon Dunphy has a piece in this in the Star today. No, I haven't read it fully yet.
38 in May.
38 in May. Pirlo played till he was 40 odd. I'm sure Gerrard has looked after himself.
Is the MLS a higher level than the SPL? I don't know.
That's actually that's a fair point. The SPL is pretty weak. Like for at least 2/3 of it is pretty weak. But I don't see the negative of Gerrard taking this job because I don't think there's a lot of pressure on him. If you contrast that to say Moyes taking the Man United job, a bit of a lose-lose situation there. Gerrard has gone into a club that they're not going to be expected to challenge Celtic straight away. They don't have the resources.
They could go bankrupt at any point. It feels that way, you know.
But if they do, just say that, right? So Gerrard's not going to be blamed for this, and he can learn in a tough environment because there are a lot of challenges there. It's not like going in and he's going to learn quickly in that job. I don't think it's a bad start. A lot of revisionism about Stephen Bradley taking the Shamrock Rovers job, that you shouldn't take the biggest job like kind of in football as your first one, and a lot of coaches have said that about Bradley himself. The Gerrard one, he will learn an awful lot about the day-to-day running of a football club because it's probably a bit of a basket case.
Yeah, well, it is a complete basket case. But when you say there's nothing to lose, like, there might be nothing to win. You could have a really good season and finish 20 points behind Celtic as Celtic break the record for number of titles won in a row, which stands at 9. They're on 7. They only need 3 more. You're there for the entire duration. You actually end up going down as the person in charge who, made the team competent.
Won't be blamed though. Would your stock have fallen? At the moment, Gerrard is 0 stock as a football manager. He has a very good reputation in his playing career. So if he does a decent job at Rangers, it won't do him any harm.
Better going somewhere like Sunderland, say. The Sunderland story
from one basket case to another, like.
Well, they've literally just sold. So Ellis Short is out, and his parting gift to the club was to pay off the debts of 110 or 180 million, depending on what you're reading, which is pretty phenomenal. Like, I don't know why he did it. I mean, and I'd like to know a little bit more about the debt. Was it just to his own company? Was he basically writing it off to himself? And is there a tax break somewhere along the way for him? I'm not sure. But anyway, so Sunderland are debt-free, have an amazing stadium, huge support, and are going to be playing in League One. Is it League One?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one underneath the Championship. And actually, something like that would be the type of situation where you can improve the situation. You can be somebody who gets the same pressure, and at the end of it, you might get a team who you get to the Premier League. But what's the best you can do at Rangers?
Improve them to the extent that they, half challenge Celtic, or at least finish a definite second in the table.
You play a Europa League game here and there.
Yeah, Europe will again be an education for him. He's going to educate himself. It's a means to an end. He's not going to be Rangers manager forever. But the Sunderland job, again, would be challenging. Although there'll be a lot more expectation there. They'd be expected to go straight back up. Rangers, I don't see where the big expectation is there. And he'd be given time. He would be given time, I would suspect.
You also have to live in the goldfish bowl of one of the most hate-filled relationships with your cross-city rivals. It's not like Liverpool and Everton. It really isn't.
Oh, well, it's disgusting. Absolutely. That's true. Whether living in Glasgow would appeal to him in many respects, I don't know. But
living in Sunderland wouldn't be that much crack either. But
no, certainly not. That's why the Arsenal job is attractive. I think people downplay that as well.
It's huge.
Location in terms of attracting families and wives and girlfriends and so on.
All right. So after the Irish news, the Racing Post, the headline here is "Le Crack is back." We don't have the Racing Post. Apologies for that. Do you have Racing Post?
I have.
Yeah.
The Crack is back. So this is Cracksman. Now, Cracksman is a son of Frankel. He's the best son of Frankel we've seen so far, and he was brilliant on his return at the new Longchamp yesterday, where I was reliably informed you could get 6 oysters for €17.
Right.
Does that sound? And a dozen for 30, I think.
At Longchamp.
At Longchamp, yeah. My Racing UK colleague Jeffrey Riddle
was eating them all.
He was. He didn't actually tell Twitter whether he went for the dozen or the half dozen, but Longchamp, they've done the whole racetrack up now, and obviously the Arc is held there every year, and it's a beautiful racetrack. And Cracksman returned yesterday with a great victory. He's going to take on his stablemate Enable in the Arc there later in the season, which will really be a race of the ages because they're from the same yard. They're both kept in training at an older age, and they'll be favourite and second favourite by the looks of it now. But he was very impressive yesterday. And Frankel obviously was... he was, I suppose, the best racehorse I've ever seen. But as a sire, he's just kind of starting off. He's very much unproven yet. But I think he's going to be the next Galileo. It'll probably be sensational.
How much is he a cover at the moment?
I think he's $250,000. I think.
Right.
I wouldn't want to be quoted on that. He's around that, I think. But he's just a full book of mares all the time, obviously. And
where's he at stud?
He's a stud in England at Khaled Abdullah's stud. So it would have been his owner back in the day, but Aidan O'Brien would love to have as many of them as he can get, but obviously Coolmore don't have him. And interestingly, there was
Coolmore ever sent mares to be covered by Frankel?
Yeah, they only have had a handful really, but what was interesting yesterday as well, there was a filly, John Gosling had a filly running by Dubawi, and Dubawi is Sheikh Mohammed's big stallion, and Coolmore and Godolphin had this standoff for years where they wouldn't support each other. That's now over. So they had, I think, possibly their first runner by Dubawi yesterday, and she won very impressively as well. So the cooling off of that kind of hatred or whatever it is now going to bear fruit for them with these Dubawi horses.
And so they effectively end up sharing resources.
A little bit, yeah. Basically, because Coolmore have so many mares that are sired by Galileo, they can't send that mare to Galileo because the mare is by Galileo, so she can't match up with there's inbreeding or whatever. So Dubawi would be a perfect fit for them as a stallion, because they want to go to Deep Impact, but he's in Japan and he's a brilliant sire, but basically they can only get him very little. Dubawi would be perfect. He would be the top class stallion who's not bred by Galileo to match the top class Galileo mares.
There's no IVF for this stuff, is there?
No. And no. And now that the rift is over, I'm sure there'll be a lot of Dubawi horses running for them.
All right.
That makes sense.
What papers have you got for us?
I have a load of papers here, some of which we've already gone through. This is the Sunsport, beaten in Fergie time, didn't go with the same old story, and Pep on the record mission. And you could kind of tell that with Man City yesterday, that they were very hungry for a team that has won the league. And I don't know if you watched the game, but it was absolutely remarkable how one-sided Man City and West Ham was. It was literally like must have been 90% of the ball they had, and it was a turkey shoot really. We have the star here. Gerro's keen on Moody Blues, and this, I think this references the fact that there's a €165 a head bash. That's the Rangers Player of the Year function last night. But the timing was a nightmare. Angry fans attempted to storm the event.
There you go. There's a reason not to do it.
I often wonder, do people have more going on in their lives than to do this on a Sunday evening? They don't? They don't.
The Rangers fans try to storm the event.
Football is ultimately a very trivial thing in the overall scheme of things, and I think we need to respect that. Sunderland owner Ellis Short axed Chris Coleman and then wiped out the 160 million debt. Poor old Chris Coleman.
It's like, well, poor old Chris Coleman, you say that, but like, don't take the job, and if you do take the job, do a better job of it.
Yeah, I guess so. And then we have the Hurled, Flynn back in action, obviously. The Hurled would obviously be strong in Dublin football, and then Firmino signs the new deal, and I think he signed the deal. I'm not sure if you saw this online, but he kind of signed it while looking the other way, like that goal he scored in Europe this year where he was... And of course the gag at the time was Firmino was looking back at his defence to see if they'd actually conceded while he scored, because they were defending so badly at the time. But Firmino, and I was saying this to our Saturday colleagues, Tommy Martin and Kieran Shannon, that Firmino is nearly as important to Liverpool as Salah, I think.
There's a trio, and like they're perfect interlinking, so you got to keep all three of them.
Yeah, I think he does more in general play than Salah. Salah scores a ridiculous amount of goals, but he's been a hell of a signing. And as Kieran Shan was saying, the players... what's that?
Cunningham.
Kieran Cunningham. As Kieran Cunningham was saying, they've signed these players from relatively unfashionable, like a lot from Southampton, obviously. Firmino came from Brazil. Obviously, Salah was a snip as well. Van Dijk was the only one that was really expensive. So they've done it fairly prudently.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. That's the other story is Paul Flynn is back playing.
Yeah, Paul Flynn back in action. Dublin manager Jim Gavin with some good news that Flynn was back. Not that Dublin necessarily need a lot of good news. His appearance is timely given the Dubs' spate of long-term injuries with Jack McCaffrey, Bernard Brogan and Keane O'Sullivan all absent. Cormac Costello suffered a hamstring injury, and no mention of you-know-who.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen there, I wonder?
I'd say you're probably planning without him at this point. I think it was interesting that Dublin played a full round of proper championship matches, and Kerry managed to run off the entire club championship in April.
I think it's really an indication of how big the inter-county game has gotten, and not for a good thing, not for good reasons really. That most Gaelic players play club; they don't play inter-county, and some of the counties where they just stop playing the championship to the club championship, like for example in Carlow, where there will be no games played so that the Carlow football team can get through the season, and there'll be a complete lack of games until Carlow are finished the championship. Like Brian Cody used to love that Kilkenny would be always playing the championship throughout the actual inter-county championship. I think it's absolute madness, like the club being really just kicked in the ass while the inter-county stuff can take centre stage, because the club is where it's at.
It's also real short term. Like, how do all the club players get up to the standard of the county players if they never play against them, and if they're not playing meaningful games in summer?
Absolutely.
Doesn't make any long-term sense.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how the April thing is going to work out, but we shall see.
We can have a look at some of the most qualified water boys over the weekend. We've got a picture of that there. So there's Sean O'Brien, arm in a sling for Tulla, beaten by Ediscorthy in the Towns Cup final. He's, I think, not just a water boy, I'm pretty sure he's coaching that team. May even be totally in charge of it.
Not really sure he's qualified to be a water boy if one of his hands is out of action.
So Cian O'Sullivan and Bernard Brogan up against each other in the club game at the weekend. I'm pretty sure things worked out for Cian O'Sullivan. Tommy's like, don't know, we'll check that out. That's it, just the two of them. Not a bad weekend for quality water boys.
Absolutely, yeah. The Dublin Championship, it was a good call, I think, by Ayr to start showing a good bit of. It's really, really good quality club football at the moment. Yeah,
Kilmacud beat Plunkett's by 4 points at the weekend. Kilmacud going very well, and also going well Castleknock, who beat Bridges out the gate. I think it's the first time they played in senior championship neighbouring clubs, and then Vincent's beating the Fianna by just 2 points. That's the closest the Fianna got to them over the last couple of years as well. So there are a lot of great games in it, and so that's what's going to happen in April. We're going to end up watching the Dublin Club Football Championship, and everybody's going, oh, this is really good, and Dublin will get better, and everybody starts going to those matches.
I'd say it's very frustrating for the club players, though. Like, it really, like, just and then they build up for April. I have a friend who plays for one of the Dublin clubs, and he's been a little bit injured, so he's kind of missed much of this month. Where do we go from here? You know,
you're done until October, really.
Yeah, it's and the championship is getting very close. I'm actually going to a championship game next Sunday. Would you know what that game is?
You're going to London? Or you're going to New York?
Going to New York.
Ah, nice.
New York and Leitrim.
Nice.
I'm gonna.
New York are odds on.
New York, they're not odds on, but Jamie Clark played against Currafin the other night. Now I'm not sure.
Challenge.
Yeah, I'm not sure. God, they'd be turning in their graves if they heard friendly.
It's a friendly.
But it's a friendly. But anyway, Jamie Clark apparently had a great game. But I've had a bet on New York, and I just want to go over. So if you're at the customs desk, you're like, "What's the purpose of your visit, sir?" And I'm like, "Yeah, back in New York to beat Leitrim, to be honest." That's it. So I'm looking forward to that. A trip to, I think it's Yonkers. Is that where?
Yeah, Gaelic Park.
Yeah, never been there before. And
it's not as big as you. So. It's very small.
I think it's a typical American day out where there are a lot of people drinking Coors Light or whatever. But the Kentucky Derby's on the day before as well in Louisville, which is 11 hours drive away. It might be a bit impractical.
Day before?
Yeah, so it's on the Saturday. Yeah, flights are insane, actually. I did think about doing it, but Aidan O'Brien has Mendelssohn running, so like obviously a non-US...
expensive for work.
Who's going to, I don't have anyone actually paying me anymore on a regular basis, but in any event, Mendelssohn's going to go over there, and he's a big chance. US horses have always won the Kentucky Derby, and Aidan goes over there with a big chance. So that would be a lot of fun if an
That's because the US horses are all on, it's legal to take drugs there, isn't it?
Lasix, yeah, which is it stops you bleeding, but that's also that it's run on dirt, which is alien to a lot of European horses, but this horse is American bred, so...
You say it's alien to them, right? But don't they all practice at home on dirt? Like
not on dirt, it's more on...
sand.
Yeah, it's a mixture of kind of wood chip and sand, and that, like, it's... The dirt is a different surface. It's not even altogether like an all-weather surface, but as a general rule, if you're American bred, you have a good chance of handling it, and Mendelssohn is American bred. He's by Scat Daddy. So that'll be quite a party. I wonder what Aidan will make of the Kentucky Derby, because Aidan is obviously notoriously healthy and teetotal, and the Kentucky Derby, if you ever read the Kentucky Derby's Decadent and Depraved, it pretty much is, and I have to tick that off the list at some stage as well.
Yeah, so this might be your chance.
So if Newstalk wants to pay for me to go over, or off the ball, whatever you want to call it, I'm happy to arrange some sort of a, you know.
I like the way the branding has permeated your brain eventually.
It has, yeah. Subconscious and all that.
OTB AM is brought to you this morning with Ayr, the home of Ayr Sport. Get amazing live sporting content free with Ayr Broadband. Let's tell you what else we have coming up on the show. Should have done this about 20 minutes ago, but apologies. So we're going to speak with Alan Quinlan about the various stories coming out of over the weekend. John Muldoon, obviously, with a conversion. As Connacht absolutely annihilated.
That must have been a dream come true for him, to be fair.
We'll talk Punchestown with Johnny in some more detail, and we will be talking Arsene Wenger with Daniel Harris in just a minute. Talk about the League of Ireland as well. The lights went out at the Camanteely game. An interesting post-match interview from Eddie Gormley with Jamie Moore, which we'll play you a little bit later on, which has been in the phrase, or in the industry they call it, going viral in the aftermath of that game. As I said, we will be with Daniel Harris in a few minutes. First, we brought you our last game of the season from Old Trafford yesterday on Off the Ball. Here are Dave McIntyre and Kevin Kilban's post-match thoughts.
If you're a potential Arsenal manager, we don't know who it's going to be. Maybe they've made absolutely no approaches for guys just yet. They want to get through this season and see can they win the Europa League, etc. Maybe the guy they want isn't available as yet. But if you were, and you're watching that game today, and you see all the young guys in there, Maitland-Niles, Iwobi, they had Reece Nelson, Willock came off the bench. They had a 20-year-old Greek defender making his debut for the club today. I mean, can you argue that there is massive potential in this squad? And if you buy 3 or 4 really good players, get a bit more out of the likes of Granit Xhaka, for example, from Danny Welbeck, from Mkhitaryan, that you have the makings of a squad that has the potential to be very, very good.
Well, yeah, you could make that argument, but that argument has been made against Arsenal for the last 10 or 15 years. Yes, I know that is maybe one criticism that I and maybe many others would have had of Arsene Wenger and on his developmental side on players and what it actually has done with the likes of maybe Theo Walcott off the top of my head, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, players that have moved on. And gone on to maybe better things, or certainly maybe not Walcott, but certainly gone on and maybe looked players at different clubs when they have moved on. I think in relation to the current squad, as you say, maybe in relation to today, yes, they've got several players that have potential, but it is just potential. I think there could be a manager that comes in and really instills discipline in this squad, or tries to instill discipline. And I think with what they've got and the mentality that's been around this squad for such a long time, they might rebel against that. There might be clashes. So it's going to take someone really strong to go against what Wenger has done for such a long time here. And that's maybe the core of the manager that when coming into this place, that's what he needs to do. I think because there's been an element of this club as it's easy going, we can get away with it, we can do what we want. I think there's got to be a manager that comes in now and has really got to maybe rock the boat a little bit and upset 1 or 2 people. That's what I think this club needs more than anything else.
It's all been carrot with Arsene Wenger and clearly nowhere near enough stick over the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So, I mean, we always hear that professional footballers love to be coached, love to be guided. They love to know exactly what their role is on the field, because that makes mentally their life a bit easier. But if you're just told to go out, just go and express yourself and I've got confidence in you, maybe you can slip into those bad habits. So maybe this group of Arsenal players, maybe a Granit Xhaka, who drew our ire several times, and indeed on TV today drew the ire of Graham Souness for his role in the first United goal. Maybe someone like him can be this kind of top-class midfield player that Arsene Wenger thought he was buying, but clearly he's being let down from a defensive point of view more than anything else. Yeah,
I think he's certainly a player more than ever, or more than any, I should say, that would need coaching. He needs to be shown the mistakes he's making defensively. I think he has got ability. I'm not necessarily in agreement with you that he can be top class. I don't know if he's got that in him. I've not seen it from him in any game that I've seen him. He's got a good left foot, he can shoot, he's a decent enough passer, but I don't think he's top class. If I'm looking at it in relation to some of the top class midfielders that are in the Premier League and across Europe at the moment. But I think, I don't know, it pains me to say, I think, with Arsenal, because I think we all know the style of football, the attractiveness that they've shown over the years. But there is something clearly lacking within the club, and that comes from the manager. The manager, as you say there, he's been quite content just to say, I tell you what, go and do what you want. But look at the Arsenal side that had success in the early days, real steel in the side, and maybe that was there before he took over, that steel within that side beforehand. But I think you've got to get back to an Arsenal side that has the flair, that has the characteristics of a really good attacking side, but also that steeliness, that real wanting to win matches, maybe ugly at times as well, that real desire to go and work for each other. I don't think that's been very evident of Arsenal for far too long now.
So finally, I'll put you on the spot now. I think today was the 26th time that Arsene Wenger has brought an Arsenal team to Old Trafford. Out of all the moments that we've seen, huge moments, some explosive moments, title-winning moments, what was the standout one for you in terms of Arsene Wenger's rivalry with Manchester United?
Well, I think it would be the Overmars and Wiltord goals. That's the thing that sticks in my mind. Watching Premier League over the years, Arsenal coming here, winning at Old Trafford and winning the Premier League title and again, I'm talking about real character, players with real character. Overmars had so much ability, but he had character. Wiltord at the time as well, character and ability. Throughout that Arsenal side during that era, they had unbelievable talent, yet they had unbelievable character as well, and that's what's been seriously lacking. I think that real character, that was maybe the standout moment. I would think it'd probably go down, maybe I think Wenger would probably reflect upon that as maybe his best moment here at Old Trafford too, I would say.
Yeah, it's been a while. It has been a while since he's had one of those moments at Old Trafford. Daniel Harris, good morning to you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? Good morning.
Yeah, so let's take a moment to reflect on the end of Wenger at Old Trafford. The stats that Sky Sports News had going this morning in terms of his record there were pretty appalling. I mean, almost relegation form over the course of something like 23 games or 22 games. Why was it so calm and peaceful and pleasant? Is it simply because, as Wenger pointed out, that he was no longer a threat to them and hasn't been for the best part of a decade?
I wondered if when Wenger said he's no longer a threat, he meant I'm no longer a threat because my team are no good, or I'm no longer a threat because I'm leaving. I felt like he might have meant the latter one, and everyone sort of took it to mean the former, because that's certainly when his relationship with Fergie relaxed once he was no longer a threat. I think the reason why it was so anodyne yesterday is partly because Wenger is a gentleman of football who has done some brilliant things, not for a long time, but has done some brilliant things, and generally, not all the time, but conducted himself in a manner that you can get behind in one way or another. Whether it was the nastiness you can get behind as a football supporter because that edge is amazing, it's an amazing part of the game, or if it was generally the way that he conducted himself afterwards, he was interesting, he was thoughtful, he was different. And to me, as someone who's watched football, the only real black mark on Wenger's copybook is trying to buy Luis Suarez immediately after the Patrice Evra situation. So he's quite an easy person to get behind. Also, the game itself, there was nothing riding on it. He was busy resting players for the Europa League. United knew that they were going to finish in the top four, so there was no needle there. So it was quite easy for everyone to appreciate him.
What are your worst memories of Arsene Wenger at Old Trafford, as somebody who counts himself as a Manchester United fan? At what point did you actually kind of feel genuine fear about the quality of the team that he was bringing? And if not fear, at least that kind of sense that there's a good chance the team are going to win today?
Oh, it's definitely never fear, but from 1997 until the Cup final in 2005, as far as I can see, that's the greatest rivalry in the history of British football. That there have never been two such good teams that have hit a concurrent peak. You had Liverpool and Nottingham Forest at the end of the 70s, who were two great teams, but they never really actually contested the title. Like, they were busy winning European Cups, but they never duked it out in quite the same way that United and Arsenal did. And United and Arsenal did it season after season after season. So when those games were coming up, you were always thrilled, excited, nervous, and you're never quite sure what you were going to see, because I think one of the great elements to that rivalry was the needle. It wasn't just about the football, which was of an amazingly high standard. It was just something's going to go off, you don't know what it's going to be, and that's part of the edge that makes football so compelling and confrontational, and why we have the atmosphere at football that you don't really get other sports.
What's most remarkable to me is that edge existed during Arsenal's most compelling period under Arsene Wenger, and he never really sought to replace it in a meaningful way. He never looked for the successor to that spine of players who you knew would leave their opponents feeling sore physically the next day. It was like, I don't understand why his team decided that they were going to be a team who only wanted to play football but not get involved in the fight.
I totally agree with that, and I think it even extends further than that. That if you compare Fergie and Wenger, which is, I guess, what we're doing in a way, is one of the reasons why Fergie was able to sustain his success and Wenger didn't, is that Fergie was always busy rotating assistants. He'd get in Carlos Queiroz, we had Brian Kidd, he had Jim Ryan, he had all sorts of different people, because he was listening to different ideas about ways of doing things, because he didn't think that he was an expert in everything. So when he wasn't sitting there, for example, watching Spartak Moscow thinking, yeah, this Vidic lad is a good player, he was sitting there with his wine watching the History Channel or whatever it is he does, because he knew that he didn't know everything about picking defenders, about organising defences. So he trusted himself to pick good people to delegate, who would then go about their job, and he would then sit at the top and say yes or no to signing players, or yes or no, that's the way I want the team to play. Whereas Wenger seemed to have to do everything himself, all the scouting, all the buying of players, all the coaching, everything that happened was him. And to be able to do that, I mean, no one's really able to do that in such an intense manner. Like you see Pep Guardiola, like he does 3 or 4 years and then he leaves, because I think he's another guy who wants to do everything himself, and it's quite hard to do. And what you saw with Wenger is that it's not just the physical element to his teams that you were talking about, although that is important. It's also, he seemed to forget that you need to be able to run fast to play football. Because I remember standing there watching games, United against Arsenal, and you'd see the same game over and over again, where he had Alexander Kleb and Thomas Rosicky and Cesc Fabregas and all these players who are all lovely footballers, but they move the ball forwards and sideways. There's no one who's going to run around the outside. There's no one who's going to run in behind. Robin van Persie, another one, brilliant player, but he didn't have any pace. And so for what you knew how Arsenal were going to play, they were going to try and pass the ball. Now they're going to generally have to pass their way through the middle of your defence. So if you have good defenders and good midfield players, that is very difficult to do. Whereas Wenger's great teams, they had Overmars, who was a direct player. They had Ray Parlour, a direct player, and Anelka. If you lose the ball to those guys, then you've got a problem, because whatever they're going to do, they're going to do very, very quickly. And Wenger seemed to forget that that was what brought him success when he had financial constraints that limited who he was able to sign. And the way that Fergie got around that was he bought lots and lots of strikers and wingers, different kinds of attacking players who will get around the fact that you don't have as much class as you once did with options. And Wenger didn't do any of that.
Yeah, which doesn't make any sense. That, like, when you talk about the pace that was in the team, Thierry Henry obviously had a lot of pace. He went away from the principles which made the team successful, and then kind of refined his principles to be something which were actually very different to what they were in the first place. It's not that it's not that he did the same thing the whole way through. It was actually that he went away from the things that made him successful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, football, so I say it's a lot, football's a simple game. And so people talk about the game develops and the game moves on, and it does. But if you took a successful team in any era, you could put them in, you took a successful team from any period of time, put them in another era, and if they were a really good team, they'd be able to look after themselves. And so you don't really need to change all that much, even though the game changes in terms of fashion. So people say, like, Wenger's football never went out of fashion. It's just his ability to play Wenger football changed, partly because he didn't have the money to sign the good players that he once had, partly because he didn't have a free run at the French market anymore because everyone was all over the place doing everything, and I think they were probably a bit slow to move. But it wasn't that I don't feel like it was particularly because the game moved on and left him behind. In the same way that people say this about Mourinho, the game's moved on, there's all these more modern coaches. I'm still sure that if you took that Chelsea team with John Terry and Carvalho and Cech and Lampard and Drogba and you stuck them in the Premier League right now, they'd have a pretty good run at trying to win that. And I think it's that what constitutes good football doesn't really change that much, but Wenger's ability to deliver it changed for all the reasons that we've been talking about.
Which is why yesterday was the perfect ending to Wenger's relationship with Old Trafford as the Arsenal manager. If he's back there in some other capacity in the future, who knows? But a late-headed winner from Marouane Fellaini, who was a sub in proper Fergie time, you could have scripted that and everybody would have said, nah, that's not going to happen.
It was interesting with Fellaini because everyone had previously thought Fellaini was going to leave. And based on what Mourinho said afterwards, it now looks like Fellaini's going to stay. And if you use Fellaini in the way that he used him yesterday, I don't think anyone would have too much of a problem with that. That is a different option. No one wants to defend against that kind of thing, and he's quite hard to beat in the air. I think the problem with Fellaini is that Mourinho likes him because he does what he's told, and you know roughly how he's going to play. And Mourinho's another. He's a control freak. He likes certainty. He doesn't like the chaos of a game of football, even though football is really quite a chaotic endeavour. And so the problem with Mourinho and Fellaini is that Mourinho will probably end up picking Fellaini in occasions when he shouldn't, in the way that, so when United were at home to Sevilla in a game they needed to win, Fellaini hadn't played for 3 months and he'd been injured, he stuck Fellaini and left Pogba on the bench. And that's the problem with Mourinho, I think, who is inherently a conservative, and with a small C, but maybe with a big C as well. Let's be honest. Who is a conservative, so he likes that certainty of knowing what you're going to get from someone like Fellaini. And I think his desire to play Fellaini extends beyond let's put some decent crosses in the box and see what he can deliver. But he did it yesterday very well.
I want to talk briefly about two other things: Steven Gerrard and also potentially the story from the Brighton game at the weekend where the Burnley fans were chatting about Jay Rodriguez. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about the relegation battle, because the West Brom win at Newcastle at the weekend means they're not entirely dead, and it felt like the Man United victory for West Brom a couple of weeks back was a cursory kind of last sting of a dying wasp. But lo and behold, with 2 games left in the season, if they win their final 2 games, they will definitely go above Swansea City, who do actually have 3 games left. But you're starting to look at teams who we thought were gone a couple of weeks back. Stoke still have a chance. Southampton definitely have a chance. Huddersfield don't have the easiest of run-ins, and maybe West Ham could get sucked back into this.
Yeah, I think I was just looking at the fixtures before. I think probably 1 win might do it for Southampton, because they've got a way better goal difference than Huddersfield. It's hard to see Huddersfield getting any more points. They've got to play Chelsea, they've got to play Manchester City, they've got to play Arsenal. I guess on that final day, they're at home to Arsenal. If Arsenal have got a Europa League final, if Arsenal are submish because they've been booted out of the Europa League, they might be able to get something out of that. But if Southampton win their next game, then Huddersfield are going to be in a lot of trouble. And I think when I looked at it a few weeks ago, I actually felt like Stoke and Southampton might be the ones to get out of it, because I think they've probably got the best attackers. And in the end, that's what you're looking for. Which teams are going to be able to find a goal when they really need one? And that's what we saw with Southampton at the weekend. Dusan Tadic is He's not a championship level player, and he was able to produce 2 really excellent finishes when they needed them. So I think Sunderland aren't getting out of anything, but I think Southampton might get out of it. And I think that Huddersfield are in quite a lot of trouble now. Swansea might just have enough points now because Huddersfield aren't going to get any more points. But then Stoke, as you say, Stoke have good attackers, so you're never quite sure what will happen. It's at least it's interesting. I mean, it was looking like the TV focus on the last weekend of the season was going to be on the Titanic battle for 8th place or something, but actually it looks like it's now going to go down to the wire. So that'll be interesting to watch. Yeah,
because it definitely did feel a couple of weeks ago, like earlier in the season, it felt like it was going to be one of the great relegation battles, and then all of a sudden it was like West Brom snagged the joint out, Stoke falling like a stone, Southampton look like they're gone, but actually, luckily enough, several teams around them aren't great either.
Yes.
Do you think both Southampton and Stoke have a chance to get out, but both won't actually manage it because Swansea should be okay, or do you think they can both do it?
I think Southampton will get out of it now, but Swansea are home to Stoke on the last day, so I think. I mean, it's possible that if a win in that might be enough for Stoke. Their goal difference is worse than Swansea's, so they'll need a point from somewhere else. At least one more point. But Stoke are home to Palace next, and Palace are basically safe. So there is a possibility that Stoke could find something there. I think if they don't win next week, Stoke, then they're down.
One last question for you then. We were talking about Steven Gerrard a little bit earlier on. Johnny reckons there's not much for Steven Gerrard to lose by taking the Rangers job. But I don't know if there's that...
paraphrasing there.
I don't know if there's much to gain from it either.
I see both sides of that. That Rangers is a big club and with a high profile. So for Steven Gerrard, like these players, that then they're used to elite level, so he's not going to want to go to a club that isn't competing for titles, really. So it's a problem. And so the thing about Steven Gerrard as a manager is that we didn't see a lot from him as a player that suggests that he has great tactical awareness. He was a brilliant player, able to stamp himself on the biggest games, but he did it through force of talent. He wasn't an organiser. He wasn't someone like Rio Ferdinand once said about Paul Scholes, his passes tell you where to go. He would run games. Gerrard wasn't that kind of player. He just had this amazing, phenomenal talent and an amazing sense of timing. And you can't impart that to somebody else with, you either have it or you don't. Some players had it. Brian Robson had it. He wasn't a great manager. So it's hard, we haven't seen anything from him. We haven't really seen anything from him as a pundit either that suggests that this is a guy who really understands how football works and will be able to communicate that to other people. But then Gary Neville does have all of these things and he wasn't much of a manager. So it's hard to know exactly who it is, exactly who's going to be good. But I guess I'd be relatively surprised if it turned out that Gerrard was good at this. But yeah, he's probably not getting a better job than Rangers, where he's going to have scope to challenge for titles and the excitement of managing a big club. So if he wants to be a manager, if I was him, I would take the job probably.
Yeah, Daniel, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
See you again.
Just on that as well, like a lot of this management lark is just down to man management. Like I was at Turner's Cross last week and Pat Dolan was there and he was talking to some of his former Cork City players and he was talking to Mark McNulty and he's like, Mark, you were tremendous tonight, tremendous. Mark McNulty had nothing to do in the game. And Dolan had this ability he would shower his players with compliments, but they would believe it and they really played for him.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is like on the flip side of that, if you live in fear of the manager, sometimes that can work as well, where probably there was an element of that maybe with Fergie, maybe an element with Brian Cody as well, that like it's a disciplinarian process. But a lot of it is just, the manager, I think Kenny at Dundalk's been very good at this as well, just making the players feel that they're valued and making them reach their potential in their own head. And you may not need to be a tactical genius. Like that was interesting about talking about delegating, the actual manager, he can do certain jobs, but he can delegate a hell of a lot as well. And a lot of it, in my view anyway, a lot of it is whether the players like playing for you and whether you inculcate the confidence in them that they may not have. And the tactical stuff can actually maybe not be as significant as you think.
Over the long term, though, it probably is if you're going to be a good manager, like a really good manager.
Yeah, but you can learn as well. I think Gerrard certainly, he's worked under great coaches, and he's worked with really good teams, and you'd give him a bit of time anyway. You know, I think it's very much a blank. Like whether a guy is a good pundit or not isn't really relevant. I think, you know.
It turned out Jurgen Klopp was a brilliant TV pundit who could kind of fully communicate exactly what he thought the team should be doing, and like Souness is a great pundit, but you know has a mixed managerial career. Many managers would chop their arm off to have the managerial career that Souness had, but because he failed at Liverpool, it's generally regarded as a completely failed career. In retrospect, unbelievable success at Rangers. It may have helped. The spending certainly may have helped, and did well with a couple of other jobs as well. But you know, what do you really want from somebody like Gerrard? I would prefer to see him go down through the divisions and.
Is he not already doing that, though?
Learn his trade.
He, like, realistically, where would Rangers be if they played in one of the 4 divisions in England?
At the minute, I think they'd be like
League One?
Lucky, yeah. But like mid-table League One.
They wouldn't be Championship.
They've got their average wage bill is $7,000 a week. Like, what's Preston's wage bill? It's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Preston's is the 3rd or 4th least in the Championship, and it is around that. Like it's the Championship's obviously quite a lucrative division, but $7,000 a week. Yeah, that's. I think there was a player at Sunderland that's on $70,000 a week from a legacy contract this year, and that's where you're at. But I don't know if it's a bad
Jack
thing.
Rodwell on the $70,000 a week.
Yeah, Rodwell. Yeah. Yeah, like it's just he'll be cutting he'll be learning at a tough level. It'll be challenging anyway. He'll learn a lot, I think, in that Rangers job, whereas he mightn't learn that going into a job where there's less expectation and it's a lot easier on him.
Yeah,
he'll learn a lot more about the dirty aspects of football management, of which there are many as well. Like.
Yeah, maybe it is just far enough off Broadway for him to feel like he can enjoy it. I want to play you this because at the weekend the World Snooker Championships are on at the moment at the Crucible, and obviously the only reason anybody tunes in anymore is because Ronnie O'Sullivan's playing. Ronnie O'Sullivan not playing anymore because he got beaten by Ali Carter. Here's his post-match press conference after he was asked about shouldering Ali at some point during the match.
It happened a little bit earlier in the game, but like I said, I don't want to dwell on it. It's not that important. I think you should just be focusing on Ali. Played a great match and he's in the tournament. Just think of Syria. Just think of all these angry. Just think of all these terrible things going on in the world at the moment. Just sitting here talking about a shoulder barge. I mean, let's really get into reality,
We're in the sports industry.
I know you're in the sport industry, but you kind of have to get it into a bit of perspective, really. And you sit here and you're trying to make something out of something that there's really nothing. And I won't buy into that. I'm a free guy. I see things for what it is. We live in a politically correct country. I think sometimes you go a little bit over the top with it. Sometimes I think there's a lot of things going on in the world that get ignored, that shouldn't be ignored and should be highlighted. So you want to highlight something like this? I would rather choose to highlight something that really is important, where young children are getting bombed to death every day. To me, that puts everything into perspective, and I won't apologise for any of that. So that's where I stand on it. So if you want to ask me another question, keep asking me, because we can go all day with this one.
In fact, I couldn't, because what happened immediately was silence. All right, no more questions, and he walked off.
I'm not sure how profoundly interested Ronnie is in world affairs, but I kind of half laud him for bringing up Syria. Now, I can't blame the journalist. The journalist is hardly going to ask him about Eastern Ghouta after he's lost Ali Carter. But I didn't actually see the shoulder incident. But,
I can't find it either.
Yeah.
It seems fairly innocuous.
It would imply that he's a future in Gaelic games,
I'd say you'd be happy enough to see. You'd have to be something. A burst of a shoulder, I'm told.
A burst of a shoulder.
A brush.
Yeah. Disappointing for Ronnie, though.
Intermediate football in Meath, so,
Yeah, Meath Hill, by the Cavan border there. But Ronnie is gone, yeah, so we have to find somebody else to support now for the rest of the tournament.
Two things, right? He is genuinely interested, I think, in world affairs. Like, he came out in favour of Jeremy Corbyn relatively recently, so he's at least paying some attention to what's going on. And the other thing is, you can't just reach for Syria as an excuse when you do some bad stuff. Now, that's not the worst bad stuff that you could do. So, there is definitely, you need to keep context on this, but, what's going on in Syria isn't get out of jail for everybody and can't just become this kind of handy...
Totally.
I got sent off in the match. I stuck my finger in somebody's eye. What about Syria, lads? I got a red card. What about Syria, lads? Come on.
Snooker is, to the best of my knowledge, a relatively low contact sport, right? Relatively.
Yeah.
So if you shoulder a lad or brush against him and you have a press conference afterwards, 99% of which is anodyne crap, really, most of the time, press conferences.
So were you disappointed that you didn't pot the balls?
Yeah, well, you'd imagine a shoulder would come into it then.
Yeah, why not?
But, you know, maybe it'll become a bigger aspect of the game in snooker, the physicality of it, you know. Maybe there's not enough physicality. Which brings us on nicely to our rugby analyst coming in here, because he's a big physical man.
Well, we're going to talk Grayson first before that happens.
He really makes me like a bit like Dave McIntyre in Kilban there. He makes me look rather small, but anyway.
Not quite at Tyke Furlong and Owen Sheehan stage just yet. That's an iconic image in the history of the show. That rugby player is actually far away.
Yeah.
So Punchestown turned out to be the Willie Mullins festival, like a dream festival. 400 grand down heading in, 500 grand up at the end. That's sensational.
It was like it nearly could have been over after day one, but it was definitely over after day two. Like the first day, Paul Townend had a complete brain freeze, which he's apologised for. It was one of these things, and he threw away a Grade 1 race, which Gordon Elliott had a 1-2-3 in as a consequence. And Gordon, I think, went to bed a little bit relieved after day one that he'd kind of more or less maintained his advantage. He was absolutely obliterated afterwards. And I spoke to, I'm just doing a piece on Racing UK, I think it'll be online today or tomorrow, about the duopoly and how, you know, good or bad this is for racing, where two trainers are so dominant. And I spoke to Gavin Cromwell, and Gavin Cromwell said, I kind of ignored Punchestown. He's obviously a trainer as well. He said, I ignored Punchestown because I didn't see any point with the two of them. Willie had 14 horses in a handicap hurdle on Saturday and 2 reserves. And Gordon I think Gordon had 3 winners in the week, so that was quite low. But Willie he saved a lot of his artillery for an assault on Punchestown that paid off. He had more prize money achieved before day 4 of the 5 was over. He'd more prize money achieved at the Punchestown Festival than every trainer except Gordon Elliott had accumulated in the entire season. And that entire season had a day and a bit left at that stage.
Yeah. So
it's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. Why is it not necessarily all good for Irish racing?
Is Celtic and Rangers good for Scotland? You know, that boring 2-horse race that it had been?
Celtic and Rangers is good, but if one of them falls off, it turns out just having one team, not so good. Like, you need... So, I think there was more interest from the casual fan for the first few days in the fact that there was something to get behind beyond the individual horses. So, like, every sports fan was like, ooh, there's, like, massive amounts of money on offer, and one guy's a bit ahead. He seems to be very far ahead, the young pretender, and he's never beaten him. There's there's an overarching narrative that you can get your soccer fans into, your GAA fans into. What do you think is going to happen here? There's stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, unless you're following a horse, you don't really know the names of all the horses.
Yeah.
If you're a casual fan.
Yeah, I think jumps racing has changed as well, because, you know, jumps racing was very popular because the small man could win. You know, you could fluke your way into a good horse. But now, there's been a lot said about the Irish Grand National having $500,000 prize money, right? Now, I was involved in a horse who ran in the Irish Grand National, and he turned up on the day and he was 25-1 for argument's sake. If we wanted to run him now, it's $5,000 to run him in the race, because it's 1% of the prize money, right? So $5,000 to run your horse, so that would put off the small owner.
Yeah.
The point-to-point horses now are being bought for big money, and the point-to-point circuit, which was more of a kind of a grassroots, the farmer next door type kind of running around the fields type reality, has now become like a shop window, and it's become very professional because the good winners are sold for like 400, 500 grand, crazy money. So the point-to-point circuit has become a little bit out of the reach of the smaller owner, and I'd be more worried about the big owners completely dominating, and this fairy tale story of Fleming's Star, and maybe go back to Denoli and horses like that maybe were owned by the man next door. That's kind of gone now. So it's like JP McManus and O'Leary and Rich Ritchie and all that. And I'm not 100% sure jumps racing is the better for that in terms of the ethos of it, and just that kind of that feeling of it being egalitarian, which is kind of on the way now very much.
Yeah, so it used to be something that everybody felt that they could be a part of, and now you can really only go as a spectator.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to fluke your way into a very good horse in jumps racing, and you know, Tony Mullins spoke of in the piece that I'm going to have in Racing UK. He spoke about a few years ago you could start off training with very little. Now, Gordon and Willie and everyone else, they've raised the bar so much in terms of facilities in the barns at home with walkers, swimming pools, all-weather gallops and all that, that it's very hard to start off now without having a load of money behind you, and it's gotten a lot more professional, whether that's a good or a bad thing. You could draw parallels with Gaelic games here, that it's become so professional that it's the smaller men are left behind, but racing's become a duopoly in Ireland, no doubt about it. When that statistic about Willie is, I could not believe it. In 4 days he got more money than every other trainer did in the entire season with the exception of Elliott.
Yeah, that is pretty phenomenal. All right, let's just briefly reflect as well on Katie Walsh and Nina Carberry retiring. That was the big other talking points later on in the week, as it became fairly evident that Willie Mullins was going to win the Trainers' Championship. How good were Katie Walsh and Nina Carberry?
They were both amateur riders, so they didn't cut it every day of the week like a professional would, but they... I guess it's kind of a little bit worn as a statement to say, you know, I'd never noticed that it was a girl riding the horse, and that's kind of sexist by its very definition to say that, you know, that it's almost implanted in your head that you can spot the girl from the boy on the horse, because I suppose a lot of the time you can, but certainly with Nina was... I mean, her pedigree was impeccable. Her stallion was obviously the late Tommy Carberry, and her dam would have been a full brother to Arthur Moore. So she had a great pedigree to make it in racing. And she was a full sister to one of the greatest we'll ever see, Paul Carberry. But Paul would have said, you know, Nina was the most gifted of them all in the Carberry clan, which also had, I think, 3 brothers, if not 4, would have been riding, including obviously Philip, who won the champion hurdle in sublimity. But Nina was absolutely brilliant rider. Like I can think of very, very few mistakes she made, and she was just so polished and so much style, like real style and strength in a finish. And the amount of times Nina would be riding the favourite in the bumper, and traditionally the bumper would be the last race in the card, and the amount of times punters would put their, you know, this kind of stupid mentality of I'm losing for the day so I'll get it back in the last, which you should never subscribe to, but nevertheless many of us do, including myself at times. We'll put our money on Nina. Nina was the get out of jail clause in the last, and she was just such a phenomenal rider. And Katie Walsh, right up there with her, probably not quite as stylish as Nina, you know, but Nina was set the bar high, but Katie, you know, brilliant rider over a fence, again very strong in a finish, no fear at all, and has shown herself to be very adept at buying and selling horses as well. Very good business brain on her, and a very likeable character as well, you know, and just a decent skin. And for the two of them to go out without any serious injury is really testament to their quality. People shouldn't underestimate that as well. They didn't have many falls, you know, they really didn't. They were very, very good at getting horses over fences, and it'll be interesting to see if either of them ever thinks about going down the training route, because we have some very successful female trainers, notably Jessica Harrington, I suppose, but I would hope that there are a lot of female amateurs to come as well who will look on them as role models, and I know that many did, like Lisa O'Neill and Rachel Blackmore, who are there at the moment.
And then one of the things we wanted to talk about was Samcro falling. One of the big stories of the week, whether or not Samcro was going to go in the champion hurdle, ended up heading off odds-on favourite at the end, and disappointing.
I don't know what I can say about this, because he fell in a hurdle race running against the seniors, and you'll always say, like, if you run a novice against the seniors, there's a chance that because they're doing things a little bit quicker and there's more pressure on their jumping, that things can go wrong. But the Samcro fall, every time I watch it, there's no real mistake there. He just crumpled on landing. So I don't know what we can glean from this. They went into the race hoping that he would tell them by winning or not winning where he was going to go next season, I think. That was one of the reasons, and the other reason was he would help Gordon over the line in the trainer's title. By the time the race happened, the title was gone anyway, and then Samcro ends up falling. We don't know if he would have won. We don't know what trip he wants next season. So it was a bit disappointing, but at least he didn't suffer injury or die.
And so a hurdler next season?
Don't know. They're going to think about it over the summer. I think he'll go chasing, to be honest. The Jigginstown, who are I referenced buying these point-to-pointers. They bought him out of a point-to-point with a view to going chasing, you know, and they buy all their horse with a view to going chasing, and I can't see why they should change their mind with Samcro just because he won a hurdle race at Cheltenham. He didn't win this hurdle race, and he's a chaser. He's a beautiful big horse built for fences, and I think they should go down that route. I think the question should be whether he's going to be a Gold Cup horse or a champion chaser.
Okay. And one other thing is that is it tomorrow the new season starts, or today?
Today. Today, it brought up a famous comment where I once slagged a jockey, and then I didn't slag him. I said he gave a horse, didn't give him a great ride, but it's the first day of the season, he can set the record straight, and he won the first race in Ballinrobe, and he was champion. He was the leading jockey for the season because it was the first race, and he had a real dig at me subsequently and at the races, which many people know what I'm talking about, but somebody, whoever wins the first race.
Did you deserve it?
I didn't deserve the slur he gave. In fact, I didn't deserve it at all, actually. But anyway, Eddie Power knows what I'm talking about. But it starts again in Kilbeggan this evening, and the pursuit of winners goes on.
Yeah, and so at Kilbeggan, is that the chance for the small guys to shine?
Yeah, and there is a lot of that. I have to say with HRI as well, Horse Racing Ireland, you know, they've been conscious of these problems, and they brought in a lot of these races that are restricted to certain horses that by definition are going to suit the smaller trainers and owners. So they haven't lost sight of it. And the thing for HRI is, do you disrupt the natural flow of the market and the free market in the way, or you know, do you cater for the struggling small trainer? I think you need to, but at the same time you have to look at these two trainers that are just really, really good, and don't punish them for being very good. Try to learn from them. And in the words of Boxer and Animal Farm, I will work harder, and I think they have to work harder.
All right, we'll move on from racing. Alan Quinlan's going to join us in studio next. But first, Hector O'Hucagan and Colm Keys were in on the pay-per-view with Joe Malloy on Sunday. Here they are talking about John Muldoon's legacy.
I got confirmation on Wednesday, so I couldn't get to that match, but I'll tell you, I did 8 hours in the garden yesterday. There was sunshine in Galway for the first time since 1976 yesterday. Connacht played in great conditions, and it was fitting that was for Johnny there to bow out. He's as good a guy, if anyone who doesn't know him. When you're living in Galway, it's a small town and everybody knows everyone. You could meet them on a Monday walking through Eyre Square or down Quay Street. Johnny Muldoon is as good a guy on the pitch as he is off the pitch. He's an absolute gentleman. Very funny. I meet him sometimes in the same coffee shop at 11 o'clock, 3 or 4 times a week after their training sessions. A fine Galway man, a Portumna man, and you know, what a warrior for the province who, you know, Johnny Muldoon has only come to our... Did we know who Johnny Muldoon was 10 years ago, 12 years ago? We didn't know.
Probably not.
But he's just...
The picture on the front of the Sunday Times, you know, doesn't really need any words. I mean, that is Johnny Muldoon's career almost in one snapshot there. Just he always brought a ferocity, and I was reading Alan Quinlan's piece in the Irish Independent yesterday, which was devoted entirely to Johnny Muldoon and the rivalry he had with the Munster back row, Dennis Leamy especially. But he brought a physical ferocity, he brought a mental ferocity, and there was a verbal ferocity as well that Alan Quinlan says. But he was just a warrior, and I think that's what everyone would say about him. And fittingly, yesterday, Connacht signed off Johnny Muldoon's career with a 47-10 win against... Now, we talk about a second-string Leinster team. Their front row was Porter, Cronin and Jack McGrath.
Not too bad.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was a second-string Leinster team, but they had a bunch of superstars out, and John Muldoon kicked a nice conversion. A nice moment for him.
Yeah, it was a nice moment.
No,
I tried a drop goal when I played for my junior club in Clanwilliam in Tipperary once. That went along the ground. A cup match, but no, I never had a conversion in a match. I would have loved to have. I'd love to be in that position to take one, but
the technique from Muldoon as well.
Full of great. It was a great send off.
As a betting man now, what price would you be to get a reasonably difficult conversion? But when you were of great mind and body,
be a big price, I'd say.
Would it be?
I know. I used to practice them all the time in training. That's all we did at the start of training was have shots at goal, but. If I was one of the Leinster players under the post now, the steam would have been coming out my ears, to be honest.
Larmour nearly made it.
Losing 47-10, and then it's not as bad as maybe as if it was a closer game.
Oh, yeah.
You know, look, and I think people understand.
I think so, yes.
It's in this, with the narrative of the story, but a great send-off. And you have to ask the question, lads, where was that kind of a performance all season? You know, no consistency, and... I'm glad for John Muldoon, but I think there's a lot of issues there that need to be fixed, and Kieran Keane's first season hasn't been a good one. They'll admit that themselves. They've been far too inconsistent, but really pleased for him, and I think everybody is in the game that he got a good send-off and got the goodbye that he deserves.
Just to finish, to round off that good send-off, we were looking for some photographs of Alan and Muldoon playing against each other. Did we find any playing against each other? No, this is as close as we could get.
The races.
What the hell's going on here? So that's the 3 retirees from the weekend.
That's at the Galway races, yeah.
That's a good photo to find, a very topical one.
There you go. So Nina Carberry retired, Katie Walsh retired, John Muldoon retired, holding the whip there, John Muldoon. Nice suit, Quinny. It's a bit baggy around the...
It's a bit baggy, that's good. A few years ago now, to be honest, Ger. They're all tight fit now. Look, they're all baggy. Look at the trousers and the jeans and Michael Swift. A few years ago.
Oh, he obviously didn't get the memo.
Yeah. Oh, Lord.
We have loads more of those photo calls to come in the future, by the way.
Keep those photos at bay now.
On eBay. Right, so we should talk about some of the other stuff at the weekend. Brent Cunningham came out after the Ulster game. Maybe we should talk about the game before we talk about that. What the hell happened in Ulster? They look odds on at half-time to get the 4th try.
Yeah, Munster started the game well, and I was thinking of this before the game. What's the story here? The story is Ulster only. It's
they need a bonus point win to guarantee
a chance and hope that Edinburgh don't get anything against Glasgow. That was going to be on later on Saturday evening. They had to fulfil their part of the deal first and foremost, and they obviously can't control what's going to happen later on in the evening. So you think very strong Ulster side, second string Munster team, the vast majority.
Nice of Munster to do that for Ulster.
Yeah, well, I tell you, it's amazing because it's probably harder playing against those guys because they're playing for contracts, they're playing for a chance to try and make the team, their futures, all that kind of stuff. And I've been in those situations before where you're kind of perceived as a second group and you're kind of told, well, you're not a starter now, but let's show you what you can do. And in fairness, they showed a lot of energy and aggression and desire to play, and there was a lot of positives in that game at the end for Munster. Calvin Nash, Stephen Fitzgerald, Sweetenham, the 3 of them were outstanding. The forwards played really well, and they caused a lot of problems for Sam Arnold. Again, he's the only starter from the week before he played. He was brilliant, and he just keeps getting better. I think he's going to be a really, really good player.
Yeah.
He's still so young. A lot of stuff happened so quickly for him this year. But Ulster, Ian Henderson going off was unsettled him a bit. That's a concern. I think we haven't heard what the story is. He clashed knees with Robin Copeland, immediately was in pain, immediately went off, which didn't look good. But Ulster, 3 tries before half-time, and they were dominant. They got 2 from the maul, and you think, right, the script is on here to get the 4th try. They're in a great position, but they started playing around their own 22 right from the kick-off. And in the space of 2 or 3 minutes, they had Luke Marshall in the bin and Munster scored a try. And that's what did the damage. And then they just panicked and they showed why they are where they are this year.
Yeah.
They couldn't win a line-out.
There's one reason why they couldn't win a line-out. Gerrard Grobler stole 5.
Yeah, your friend, Grobler.
played amazingly.
He was very good, yeah. He was very good, to be fair. Outstanding. And himself and Klein, when they were together in the second half, 2 big men who played like it was their last. Grobler played like it was his last ever game of professional rugby because he was outstanding, and that was his best performance over the 80 minutes. So Ulster's lineup was a shambles, and they made so many mistakes and errors, and they just created absolutely nothing in the second half of that game, and it just sums up their season, you know.
Yeah.
It just sums up the season.
We were getting loads of tweets about Grobler and the fact that it was announced that he was leaving, but that was always the plan. He was only ever going to be...
No, he was... I tell you what was going to happen was he'd signed... When he signed last year from Racing, he signed a 3-year deal with Gloucester to commence at the start of the 2018-19 season, and for 1 year he was going to Munster. I think because there was an option to change that during the year, that then the talk was that he was going to sign for Munster, and that there was a buyout clause. Munster were going to do that, but obviously with all the stuff that happened in January, and I'd say the IRFU did a U-turn and said, look, in hindsight, this is not the best idea, and they pulled back and allowed Munster to sign him because it was more or less agreed that he was going to stay with Munster, even though Tyburn was still coming. It would have given them a lot of depth in the second row that I think they need. They still need another second row, I think. But, you know, so it seemed like it was a surprise on Saturday. That story was kind of around for the last 2 months, that once it hit the headlines in January about his 2-year ban for taking drugs, and morally, was it right or wrong, should he be here? I think that's when the RFU said, look, it's not happening, he's got to go. So he has the 3-year deal for Gloucester, and I think he's going to go and fulfil that now.
Yeah, he's obviously very good at rugby.
He's a very good player. Yeah, he's super, and he showed that, and I think that's why. And I had heard this a lot from some Munster players, how good he was in training, how skillful he was, how athletic he was, and then he got injured obviously at the start. So he certainly would have helped him a good bit this year. But look, the rest is history. Everything that happened, and
he can get his revenge on Ireland in the World Cup when we're slated to play them in the quarters or semis. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, it would. But he's off, and look, I think he'll be important for the rest of the season. And some people are saying, well, should he have started against Racing, and maybe he'll start in the next couple of weeks in the run-in for them.
Ulster are 4th in Conference B on 62 points. Ospreys are 5th in Conference A on 44 points. That's why Ulster are going to play Ospreys at home in the Champions Cup qualifier.
It comes down to points in the table for who has the home quarterfinal or that home playoff. So Ulster, as you say, 62, Ospreys 44, and that means just straight, more points scored. They're home in the Kingspan in 3 weeks, and that is such a massive game, not just financially, but from the whole perspective of maybe just healing all these cracks and fragments throughout Ulster rugby that's on and off the field. If they're not in Europe next year, I think the whole thing explodes. And what coach? Okay, they say the coach has agreed. He's with another club. It can't be announced for 2 or 3 weeks. I wouldn't have come out and said that. I would have just waited and said, look, we're looking, and we'll have someone in a couple of weeks. But if they're not in Europe, it's a massive blow to them.
The only thing about saying that you have a coach means that you can start telling
privately, maybe you can tell.
You can tell Ross Byrne, you can tell Joey Carberry, you can tell people, so
yeah.
This
isn't. You can
isn't.
still tell them without saying it publicly as well, that we have a coach. You can still say, look, this is who's coming.
It means that the argument that you're sending them to a team that doesn't even have a coach, though, that's like...
Probably, yeah.
less shambolic if they do have a coach.
Yeah, makes a valid point for sure.
Because that came up again, that was the point I was making at the start of this chat, was Bryn Cunningham was out saying the IRFU are talking to Ross Byrne and Joey Carberry, and if you've got a scenario where 2 of the best 3 out halves in the country, 3 of the best 4 out halves in the country are all playing for the same province, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And I think it was reported last week that it was Joe Schmidt and David Nucifora who accelerated this conversation with Leinster. It wasn't. It was Ulster saying, look, we need to find a fly half somewhere. Is he going to be Irish qualified, or are we going abroad? And that's a very simple question.
Yeah.
Are you going to allow us to go abroad if we can't get someone within? So we need an answer on that pretty soon.
So it's fair enough that they would ask.
Which is understandable. So I think that's why that conversation, because there was talks of the timing of it, the week that was in it when Leinster were, playing that semi-final that week and stuff. Why did it happen? I think it needs to happen. They need to know one way or the other. Do they go outside Ireland, or do they get someone from within? There's a couple down the road in Dublin here that would be brilliant for them if they were allowed to go after him.
Yeah.
But again, it's up to the player. We had this conversation.
It doesn't seem like it was handled very well. That the week before the Saracens game, you'd walk in and
I'm not sure how it got out. The conversation, it's part and parcel of your working week for the coaches. Okay, you could say, look, the timing isn't great here. Come back to us next week. But how it got out and was leaked out to the press, that conversation, I don't know. There's always a reason. Maybe somebody from Ulster said it to kind of get this conversation going and create that bit of uncertainty. But they need a fly half. There's no doubt about it.
Strong speculation this morning that Dan McFarland might be the man. Des Berry has written a story. Always very well sourced. Des. Strong speculation Dan McFarland might be the successor to John O'Gibbs at Ulster. Currently employed as Gregor Townsend's assistant coach for Scotland. Spent 15 years at Connacht, 6 as a prop, 9 as an assistant coach.
Highly thought of as well.
Yeah, so he went straight from playing to coaching and it took Townsend to convince him to move to Glasgow was in his best interest, and then obviously he's gone with them as well. So
yeah, he's not obviously your marquee. And this is where they've had the problem before, where they've kind of gone for trying to find names rather than, you know, you can unearth some brilliant coaches, brilliant rugby coaches who are not necessarily the finished article, and you need a little bit of luck with that as well, and you need to do your due diligence, and the big thing is how they handle players and what kind of enthusiasm they bring and how can they manage the group. And that's exactly what Ulster need, is someone to come in now and create a real good team spirit, if you like.
Yeah.
Similar to what Rassie Erasmus did with Munster. Munster got that one really right, and it was proven that he was brilliant. When he came in at the start, he had a reputation for team morale being a really important part of his philosophy.
Yeah.
You know, when he was with the Cheetahs, Vian Herbst, I can't think of his second name, we played for South Africa, or played for Munster with us. He would have played with him under the Cheetahs, and he taught me about him having barbecues with the families, bringing the wives, the partners, the kids.
Yeah,
having those kind of.
That was his character. He was like, I only met him once, but he was unbelievably effusive. And
that was a really important part. Where some other coaches, okay, they've so much going on, they're managing so much stuff, they don't have time for the nitty gritty, getting to know the player type scenario, because there's so much pressure there. But he was big at that, and that's what Ulster need now, someone to come in and really gel the group together, because to be fair, there is a lot of decent players there, a lot of good players.
Does McFarland fit the bill?
He's not your big name. He's not your big, doesn't have that stature in the game worldwide, but from what I hear, and I've heard this from Scottish guys, that he's a really, really good coach, good motivator, and highly thought of. So someone like that might work straight away.
Yeah, okay. So that's the story with Ulster, and they possibly have a coach. If there is going to be an out half who goes, is it more likely that it's Ross Byrne or Joey Carberry? I mean, Leinster see Carberry as a 15.
Yeah.
And they definitely would have a concern about what happens if Rob Kearney gets injured, or if Johnny Sexton gets injured. He's their number one replacement for both of those situations. Yeah. It's not like he's not going to get game time.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Ger. It's they'd probably try to hold Carberry more than maybe Ross Byrne, but I think then Carberry and Sexton are going to be gone for the next 12, 14 months, and it's going to be a very busy period. So who do they play then when he's away?
Yeah.
If Ross Byrne goes,
and if Leinster's B team is getting hammered,
and ultimately, if the players are contracted beyond this season, which I believe they are, they don't have to go anywhere. They actually don't have to go anywhere. It's when their contracts are coming up, whether Leinster or the RFU are in a position to offer them contracts, and then when it's on the table, say, well, we can give you a contract, but
it's for here. You
know, so they can't really influence it then. So we'll wait and see. I think in an ideal world, you'd love to. It makes sense that they're all playing games, and it's not just playing a couple of games. It's playing 20, 25 games as the starting 10, week on week. And that's what Ulster want. They want someone to come straight into the team who's going to play their starting 10. And it's very hard to put value and the magnitude of that, you know, experience for the step up to national level. And I've often said it before, you go back to Argentina in 2015 World Cup, there's 5-6 guys out of the team, and the guys that come in, they haven't, it's like, you know, doing your helicopter license, isn't it? It's miles in the air,
yeah.
You know, and that's what they want.
Definitely helps.
From a national coach's perspective, he wants guys being exposed to these high pressurised games.
All right, Quinny, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. Breaking news out of Liverpool this morning that Željko Buvac won't work with Liverpool between now and the end of the season for personal reasons. If you don't know Buvac, he's the number 2 to Jurgen Klopp and has been with Klopp for 17 years, but is leaving effective immediately, ending a 17-year relationship with Klopp in the week of the Champions League semi-final against Roma. Frequently described as the brain behind the pair's gegenpressing tactical approach, he's understood to have left following a dispute with Klopp. This isn't good, is it?
Not at all. Timing is terrible, like just when they've all the momentum. And you'd wonder, you know, Clough and
Before
Taylor.
I go, I have to tell you, it's Vian Dupree, not Vian Herbst. Vian Dupree. Remember, he played for Munster. He played under Rassie and the Cheetahs. Anyway, I had to say, he killed me for not saying it. I just went blank.
You're happy now for the rest of the day?
Well, I wouldn't say happy, Johnny, but I'm a bit more content.
One last thing we want to play you here is Cabinteely and Athlone Town saw their First Division Electricity League match brought to an early end on Saturday evening due to a floodlight failure at Stradbrook Park. Cabinteely manager Eddie Gormley spoke with Jamie Moore after.
Eddie, what's your understanding of why the game's been called off tonight?
The lights weren't working.
Any idea why?
Not an electrician, Jamie. Don't know.
We've heard that it's possible that the generator wasn't working.
Like I said, I'm focused on the game. I don't know what's going on. All I'm told is the lights aren't working, so the game was called. So that's it. I mean, the game itself, we might as well talk about that because I was more interested in what was going on the pitch.
If we can stay on the lights for now, because it's clearly another negative news story involving the league and the First Division club. The lights did come on in the second half and went off again.
Listen, Jamie, I'm a football manager. I'm not an electrician. You want to talk about the lights? Go and talk to somebody that knows something about generators. I don't know anything about generators. Speak to me about the match. I'm not speaking to you about the lights. There's nothing to do with me.
So I asked to speak to somebody from Cabinteely about the lights, and I was told that you were the person I was going to speak to about it, so I'm entitled to ask the question.
Hang on, Jamie. You can ask me about the match because I'm here and in football capacity, not about a set of lights that I know nothing about. I'm not an electrician. Don't ask me to change a bulb because I wouldn't be too clever at changing a bulb either. If you want to talk about the football match, I'll talk about the football match. I don't know why generators blow or don't blow. Nothing to do with me.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting it is, but as the Cabinteely manager on the night, are you disappointed that the game has been abandoned because the lights didn't work?
I'm disappointed. We're 1-0 up. We're 1-0 up and the game gets abandoned. In an ideal world, the lights stay on, we finish the game out and hopefully we see it out. And that's everybody's happy.
Which of course begs that philosophical question, how many League of Ireland managers does it take to change a light bulb?
Hey,
you know? Poor old Eddie, he's not happy. Must be very frustrating though. This is the third instance in the First Division this season. Of course, first day of the season, the referee decided, rightly or wrongly, with Harps and Drogheda, the lights aren't good enough here for a match for safety reasons. That was fine. Terryland Park, there was a delay in a game subsequently because of floodlight issues. And it's not good, not good.
Not great marketing. It's not a great look for the league. It just makes everybody wonder what the hell's going on.
No, because Athlone are, you know, an absolute shambles this season. They've been atrocious on the pitch. They've shipped a lot of goals. They've brought down the standard of the league a lot. Certainly brought down the standard of the league in terms of how it was viewed by people off the pitch by what went on last season, which was an absolute disgrace. They brought the club into the mud, and I don't know if it'll recover anytime soon from that. But Cabinteely are a club that can be lauded in many ways with their underage structure and what they're doing, and seems to be doing things quite prudently. This is not good.
Generally though, let's go back to what happened on Friday night. You were at the game on Friday night?
I was asked, where was I Friday night? I was actually went to Pats and Bows, but I watched the Cork Dundalk game. It was back to the old story. Cork just they won 1-0. It wasn't particularly pretty, but their record over Dundalk in the last 9 games, I think they've only lost once, and you know, Dundalk will ask questions of themselves. You know, we went there, we were in better form going into the game, didn't really create an awful lot, there wasn't much in it, but we lost, and Cork have gone top again, and there's a full round of games tonight. Dundalk are home to Pats, Cork are in Tala, which I would certainly advise people in Dublin to get along to that. It's going to be a very interesting game, also because Rovers have been in terrible form themselves, and Cork will now go down there fresh from the win on Friday night thinking they can do it, but Dundalk will have to ask a few questions of themselves, you know.
How close is Bradley to being sacked at the moment?
To be honest, I don't know, and I kind of laud Rovers for not, you know, rushing to sack another manager. And as a general rule, I think a manager deserves 2 years in the job anyway, and Bradley's in his second. They've every chance of finishing the top 4. They're almost certainly not going to win the league. Is that good enough for Rovers? I don't think it should be, but in the League of Ireland now, the most important thing really is to get into Europe, because there's so much money in Europe. Like, 4th place isn't bad at all, as long as you get into Europe. And there's a big chasm between the have-nots and the haves, and the have-nots are the teams who are not in Europe. I don't think Bradley is under huge pressure at the moment.
But isn't that the right thing to do for them then, to actually get a bit of stability and say, we've decided that you're our guy and we're going to give you time to learn? Because ultimately, you look at the successful clubs in football, they've taken a risk on a manager and they've ridden out those difficult periods at some point.
Yeah, I'm not sure Rovers are improving. That's the main thing. I'm not sure they're any better than they were last season, despite the fact they manifestly have more talented players in their squad. They have to start winning games kind of a little bit ugly, and they have to start behaving. They're a little bit like Arsenal. They're a little bit rudderless at times. They don't really have a leader on the pitch, and I think that kind of stems from the fact that their coaching team is very, very young and probably not experienced for pressure situations. Bradley has been far too open, I think, in the media. You were talking about Ulster revealing that they might have a manager. I think Bradley has said things in the media he shouldn't have said as well. I think he's learning as he goes along, but John Caulfield is such a wily fox. He's so intelligent with how he deals with everything, and he will go down to that game tonight expecting Cork to win. But Rovers are well capable of winning that game. Dundalk, now the pressure is on them to beat Pats at home, and Pats aren't a bad side at all. So it's going to be a fascinating campaign, it really is. But Tal will be an interesting place to be tonight.
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen? Cork going to win?
I've tipped in the Racing Post on the fixtures day. I've tipped Cork to win, but I wouldn't be jumping the gun on it too much. You know, I'm not sure if you've seen much of Graham Burke at Rovers, but this guy is phenomenally talented. You know, he was at Villa. He was like I think he was the top scorer in the underage Champions League when he was at Villa. He's such a talented player. Interesting backstory. His dad was the victim of a shooting in Dublin earlier this year. You know, it was all over the papers, and his family life would be more complex than the average one, and maybe at times he wears his troubles on the pitch a bit, but he's such a good player, you know, and I love seeing this in the League of Ireland. Rovers Dundalk was a scrappy game the other night, mainly because Cork played it on their terms, but Rovers don't play like that. They play they play a little bit too much as individuals at times, but they're very talented individuals, and he's probably the most talented player in the league at the moment.
All right, Johnny, good stuff. Enjoy the game tonight. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me in there.
Tonight on the radio, the football show, Monday Night Rugby, and everything else that you would expect from Monday nights off the ball. Tomorrow, Keith Andrews and Andy Lee are going to be in studio with us. We'll be reacting to some of the boxing news that's happened just recently, good and bad, with Andy, and of course looking back on some of the football stories with Keith as well. If you've missed anything today, feel free to leave a comment. At Off The Ball AM is the specific Twitter feed for this show. You can always get us youtube.com/Off The Ball, and remember to hit subscribe on YouTube, because that way you get all the goodness of all of our extended content as well. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.